There you go.
So we'll get started. So I wanted to say good morning and welcome to the 356th meeting of the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board. Just for you all's information, you should know that this meeting is being recorded. You just heard Regina turn on the recording. If anyone online should experience difficulties during this meeting, please send a message in the chat box. At this time, we'll move so that our BMC Executive Director can say a few words about the passing of Bala. Mike.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Good morning, everyone. I'm sure everyone has heard by now, but in the last few weeks, we lost a very valued staff member, Bala Kundi, who was with us for 20 years. And everybody who worked with Bala, who knew Bala, loved him. And we're gonna do something as a planning community in a few months to get people together so they can say all these nice things. But the one thing I'll say about Bala is that when you speak about somebody who passed, there's often a caveat. There's often a but or a so, or there's no but with Bala. He was the best. He brought joy to our office every single day. He was a mentor for our new employees. He was a friend to our experienced employees. He did tremendous work. His commitment, especially in recent years, to pedestrian safety is something that should be lauded. He started a number of programs at our office that he believed and absolutely were saving people's lives. And I think his spirit is going to be missed in our office. His work is going to be missed in our office. His presence is already missed in our office. And I know that sentiment is shared by everybody on this call. And once we get a little further along, we will set something up and have an opportunity for the whole community to come together and honor him and remember him in a way that he would want to have happen. So I know we shared this news last week. It doesn't get any easier to say, but Deandra, thank you for the time to say this here.
Mike, we really do appreciate you taking time to come and speak with us today. I will say that I've known Bala for many years, and no matter when I called him and reached out to him for some assistance with freight issues or any issues associated with transportation, he was always jumping in and willing to help. And his smile was undeniable. We got a chance last year at the planning conference to spend time with him and some of his family members. So it's a great loss for our community, and he will be sorely missed. So we appreciate you taking time to come and share a few words with us this morning.
Thank you.
I now ask Rebecca to start the roll call to determine member participation. Rebecca, can you do the roll call for us?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City.
Here.
Thank you. Baltimore County,
Present.
Carroll County,
Here.
Harford County.
Present.
Thank you. Howard County,
Here.
Queen Anne's County,
Here.
MDOT,
Here.
RTA of Central Maryland, MDOT MTA,
Here.
Maryland Department of Environment,
Here.
Maryland Department of Planning,
Here.
FHWA.
Here.
Did I miss anyone? Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, sounds like we have a quorum. Our first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our July 25th BRTB meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes? And if so, can I have a motion and a second for approval of those minutes?
Motion.
I'm sorry, who motioned?
Hartford Transit.
Hartford County, Transit motion. Can I get a second?
Baltimore City seconds.
Baltimore City second. All right, when we say your name, Rebecca, can you call out the names for approval of the minutes?
Sure. Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County,
Aye.
Hartford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
MDOT,
Aye.
RTA of Central Maryland. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rebecca, and the minutes are approved. With that, we'll move to the second item on the agenda, which is the public participation opportunity. We now offer a chance to our public to speak to the board. If anyone has any comment on the action item, please wait for that item to be discussed. Is there anyone who wishes to, I see something in the chat. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board at this time? If so, please indicate in the chat box. Regina, can you check and let me know if anyone wishes to address the board?
There is no one at this time that does wish to address the board.
Thank you, Regina. We'll now ask Monica Beheader to present the report on the public involvement activity for us. Monica?
Good morning.
Morning.
We have the public involvement report to pull up. I'm not seeing it.
Let me go back up here. I thought I had it. Share. Public involvement. There you go.
There we go.
Thank you so much. So this month, staff are currently conducting an internal debrief of our public engagement work for Resilience 2050, as well as the tip and conformity. And this involves a review of our engagement statistics, as well as soliciting feedback from the public, as well as you, the board members, on how we think the process went. We had a 2-year planning process for Resilience 2050, and throughout that time, we invited the public to weigh in on the draft goals and strategies that guided the plan, the draft plan, and to share their thoughts on over nearly a dozen white papers on a range of different topics. We had over 11,200 people visit our project websites, and comments were received from the public, including individuals representing stakeholder groups, large organizations and coalitions, and other interested parties. During that time, we had over 430 comments were shared with staff and decision makers throughout this process. And in drafting Resilience 2050, the board did make several adjustments to the based on public feedback, and that included adding additional scoring criteria for boosting transit candidate projects. And we did want to note that Resilience 2050 does include twice as many transit investments as the BRTB's previous long-range transportation plan. And that includes funding for an east-west transit and northwest transit corridor in Baltimore City, the bus rapid transit in US 29 in Howard County, and 17 different transit hubs around the region. So based on public feedback, we did make some changes to the mix of projects. And in terms of meeting attendance during the Resilience 2050 public outreach period, we had several dozen people in attendance, with most of the people attending our virtual meeting. That was the most well-attended meeting that we had. And so again, we're looking for feedback from the public on how they think we did during this planning process. So we put together a little survey at publicinput.com/resilience2050 survey, and we're welcoming comments on that through September 8th. In terms of upcoming comment periods, Later this year, early next year, we're going to be going back out for phase 2 of the Patapsco Regional Greenway, Guinness to Southwest Area Park project. And we've already had a comment period on that, so we're going to return to the public with some updated information and ask for their feedback on that. This fall, we're preparing to do another big push for pedestrian safety in October with the Look Alive Safety campaign. And then next year, we're going to be implementing some new UPWP activities that'll be seeking public engagement in the fiscal year. And that includes a major project called the Vision for Regional Bicycle Network. And then we'll be going out for another segment of the Patapsco Regional Greenway for the Stony Run segment. And we'll have a couple of other projects as well that will be soliciting public feedback. So that's just a highlight of a few things coming down the line for you to look forward to. Are there any questions?
No questions from me, Monica, but I will say that 430 comments, I think, was pretty impressive. The outreach that we did, I think, was pretty extensive. And I think it should be noted that we did make some adjustments to the scoring as it relates to transit investment. A lot of conversation was had at the last meeting about our transit project. So I think it should be noted that we did make some adjustments as a board. And I definitely encourage the public to go on and do the survey so that we can get your feedback and see if we need to make any tweaks to our public outreach portion of this. I'll open it up to any other board members that may have comments or questions. All right, hearing none, Monica, we thank you for your presentation. We'll now move on to the report from the technical committee, and we'll now ask Ms. Angie Daniel to please present the report for the technical committee today. Angie?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Our last technical committee meeting was held on August 1st, 2023. We started off with a BMC staff presenting an overview of projects submitted to the Transportation Alternatives Program for the Baltimore region, along with recommendations for funding. The technical committee voted to send a recommendation for BRTB for consideration. Then we talked about the UPWP updates, which consisted of the Maryland Travel Survey, which was a travel by motorcycle. BMC staff discussed results from the 2018 to 2019 Maryland Travel Survey, in particular, a study of travel by motorcycle. The largest shares of motorcycle riders are those in the age group of 18 to 44 years old, which is a percentage of 71.4%. The large share of motorcycle riders are those with the highest incomes of $150,000 or more, which is 64.5%. The largest share of motorcycle riders are whites, which consists of 95.5%. And the largest share of motorcycle trips are for work, which is 30.4%. Next, we discuss the demonstration of draft crash data dashboard. The BMC staff demonstrated the staff developed crash data dashboard. The initiative was based on a presentation from a previous AMPO conference. The Maryland State Police Crash Record Database recently became publicly available after the planning area dashboard consultant activity closeout. Maryland State Police crash data from 2018 to 2023 was downloaded. A Tableau dashboard consisting of 3 views. 3 views are crash data behavior summary, a crash record behavior analysis, and a crash record map. And that was created and published. Staff also shared examples of how to use the data. Next, we went over the connected and automated vehicle integration for local governments. Kittleson and Associates, along with BMC staff, presented an overview of the recently completed CAV integration for local governments project. The purpose of that project was to provide an overview of CAV impacts and best planning practices, as well as present actionable recommendations to help agencies prepare for gaps in the region. Proactive planning will help agencies maximize benefits of CAVs, minimize the challenges, and achieve agency goals. Over the next 1 to 2 years, local agencies were recommended to take a range of actions to prepare for CAVs, and a list of 11 items was discussed. Lastly, a closed session was open to discuss one of the proposed RFPs for the PRG Operations, Maintenance, and Branding Plan task. Committee members agreed with the project scope and gave approval to move forward. And that concludes my report from the technical committee. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Angie. Do we have any questions from any members of the board? All right, hearing none, Angie, thank you for your presentation. We'll
Thank
now
you.
move on to the consideration of resolution 24-3. Ms. Harris, please introduce the first action item.
Good morning. Today, the BRTB is being asked to consider Resolution 24-3 to select projects for the Transportation Alternatives Program grant. Ms. Charlene Mingus will begin the presentation. Charlene?
The Transportation Planner at BMC, and I'll be presenting an updated overview and recommendations for funding of applications to the fiscal year 2024 Transportation Alternatives Program, which includes Safe Routes to School projects. The applications were due mid-May this year. MDOT SHA BMC staff reviewed applications and conducted site visits in coordination with the applicants. Funds available in fiscal year 2024 for the Baltimore region include $4,438,487. There were 4 applications received totaling $12,054,000 in requests. Funds available in fiscal year 2024 for the Aberdeen, Bel Air South, Bel Air North area include $430,525. New applications were received. First, Anne Arundel County submitted an application to consider an extension of the existing BWI trail spur. The 1.2 mile shared use path would travel through Lincoln from Maple Road to the Nursery Road Light Rail Station with the total cost of $8,800 and a 20% match. As stated in the application, the purpose of the project is to provide safe access for pedestrian and bicyclists living in one of the most underserved portions of the county. The BWI trail spur connects to the B&A trail, and the extension will connect to another planned shared use path. It will also provide access to the Nursery Road and Lincoln Light rail stations. Next, Anne Arundel County also submitted an TA application for construction of a shared use path and bicycle lanes on the Strong Beach Road from Maryland 214 to Triton Beach Road, including intersection improvements. The project is approximately 1,500 feet long with a total cost of $474,000 and a 21% local match. The purpose of the project, as stated in the application, is to support connections to surrounding communities in the Beverly Triton Beach area, support connections to commercial development and May Elementary, and to connect to a planned shared use path on Maryland 214. Howard County submitted an application for construction of a 1.4 mile long shared use path along Dobbin Road from Maryland 175 to Oakland Mills Road, as well as sidewalk improvements and new pedestrian crossings, with a total cost of $5,500,000 and a 20% local match. The purpose of the project, as stated in the application, is to provide separated bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure to provide access to jobs, education, shopping, restaurants, residences, and transit, and to connect existing improvements on Oakland Mills Road and Dobbin Road north of Maryland 175. Anne Arundel County submitted a feasibility study application for a Safe Routes to School project to perform accessibility studies at 10 elementary schools and up to 10 middle schools in the county. The estimated cost of the project is $306,000 with a 22% match. The purpose of the project, as identified in the application, is to identify ways to increase the number of students walking to schools by identifying the physical barriers that prevent them from doing so and providing recommendations to overcome these barriers. The following projects were recommended for full funding: Dobbin Road Shared Use Pathway and Safe Routes to School Accessibility Studies Phase 2. Thank you.
So at this time, Madam Chair, we're requesting the board to consider approval of these two recommended projects for the grant.
Okay, thank you, Regina. I'll now ask the member to move for approval of the resolution and a second. Can I have a
Howard County, will motion to approve.
Howard County motion? Can I get a second?
Baltimore City,
County.
second.
Okay, Baltimore City second. Howard County motion, Baltimore City second. Does any of our members have questions or comments on the resolution?
So okay to explain why those two projects in Anne Arundel County is not considered for recommendation? Just curious.
I would say based on the amount of money available, it is not possible to
I see.
fund all four. And so there were a team of individuals that reviewed the applications, and Dobbin Road and Safe Routes to School were the top two scoring.
Okay.
All right, do we have any further questions from our members? All right,
There we
hearing none, do we have any questions from any members of the public? Anything in the chat?
I do not see anything in the chat at this time.
All righty. All right, Regina, has any member of the public signed up to speak on this resolution?
No, they have not.
Okay, all right. All right, so members, when Rebecca calls your name, please indicate A or nay for a vote on the resolution.
Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City,
Yay.
Baltimore County,
Yay.
Carroll County,
Aye.
Harford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
MDOT,
Aye.
and RTA of Central Maryland. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, was that RTA of Central Maryland?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. The resolution has passed. And with that, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is a presentation from Mr. Sean Winkler, the Manager for Federal Infrastructure Strategy at MDOT, who will brief the BRTB on MDOT's coordination and technical assistance efforts with local and regional agencies on grant and the IIJA program. Mr. Winkler, can you present to us now?
Thank you, Chair Walker. Can everyone see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. Well, good morning, Chair Walker and members of BRTB. It's a pleasure to be with you today. On behalf of MDOT, before I get started, I just wanted to echo our thoughts and prayers are with everyone at the organization, and we are sending our condolences for your loss. My name is Sean Winkler. I am the Manager of Federal Infrastructure Strategy at the Maryland Department of Transportation. I started about 4 months ago now. I was previously a federal advocate in Washington, representing MPOs, state DOTs, counties, transit agencies across the country on federal matters. But with the passage of the infrastructure bill and also the Inflation Reduction Act, many of my former clients were quick to tell us, we don't care about policy anymore, go get us some money. So it is my honor to now do some of this work from my home state here in Maryland. I've had a chance to meet some of you already at MACO last week and around already working on some grant opportunities. And we are looking forward to keeping it going. I won't spend too much time on the historic amount of funding available to us, but I do have a couple of notes I just want to mention. $1.2 trillion in the bipartisan infrastructure law, really stunning. That is an authorization, not a guarantee. But what is really unique about the infrastructure package is that it does contain a $550 billion advanced appropriation, which is really the first time that there is guaranteed year-to-year funding for all of the federal infrastructure programs. That's really the first time they've kind of provided that advanced guarantee like that, as opposed to having to wait for Congress to do its yearly dance on will they fund the government, will they not? Always fun to watch, less fun to plan for state and local DOTs and county managers on this call. But certainly that's how Washington rolls. So I think it's really exciting. It gives the state of Maryland as well as BRTB and the member jurisdictions really an opportunity to plan in advance, because the funding is known, what's going to be out there every year, as well as the programs. But what is kind of our thoughts for this role, and there are many kind of state infrastructure coordinators around the country working on this stuff, but nearly a third of the federal funding in these bills can only be obtained through competitive grants. So that is really where we are trying to focus a little more on as the state of Maryland, as well as kind of growing our resources here to help our local partners like you all. So what is our role with all this money out here? You know, I think our first job is to kind of be your strategic guide and technical assistant when possible. I'll give a quick example of that. So sitting down with some of you at MACO, I had the opportunity to chat with some folks in counties about, you know, what are kind of your unfunded needs, or do you have a couple of projects in a 2 to 3 year timeline that may make sense to seek federal funding? Or do you have a grant application you put in last year and it wasn't successful? And are there ways to perhaps sharpen our pencils, make sure every I is dotted and T is crossed to make it a more successful application? So I think that is really kind of role number one. We really want to be a sounding board, offer the resources we have to help you kind of think through opportunities that may make sense to federalize or not, and do our best to position your application with our support for funding. In addition to kind of that sounding board, everyone on this call is extremely busy. You guys are running counties, you guys are running transportation offices. I don't expect anyone on this time to have the pleasure of reading 150-page notices of funding opportunity that I may find myself reading with a club soda and lime late in the evening or early morning coffee. So we have really worked to develop some tools, some digestible, you know, 1 or 2 page fact sheets on programs that are all available on our website that I'll be sure to highlight at the end of this presentation as well. But we really are doing our best to track every single opportunity when it comes out and provide, especially for the more prominent ones, a little deeper dive into what's eligible and perhaps ways to get strategic and creative to get your needs funded. And of course, state assistance, you know, that can include making sure Secretary Wiedefeld is signing a letter of support for you. That can include, you know, the more information you share with us, the more helpful we can be. So that assistance can include coordinating with the governor's office, as well as they often ask us what are MDOT's priorities on some of our applications for local partners, or which ones have kind of shared information with us. Always makes it easier to be your advocate because I think we are really kind of shifting the tone here, especially in our new administration, that, you know, any additional federal dollar for the state of Maryland, whether it's the state, whether it's a county, whether it's a town, is a good thing. We want to increase funding opportunities for everyone. It doesn't matter to whom per se. A rising tide can lift all boats here. So in addition to some of those things, we are also working on outreach. So some of you on this call have already heard from me or have seen some of our folks speak, but we've been working closely with MML and MACO to put together some panels and webinars. On May 24th, just my second or third week here, we hosted a webinar some of you were on about the Safe Streets program with MACO. We had about 80 attendees for that. We are going to host one in October with MACO, which this one I think will get high interest, but I am working on a federal earmarks 101 presentation for that one. And I think we'll have some guest speakers from SHA to kind of talk about that as well. Now that earmarks are back in Congress. Certainly another opportunity for federal funding, as of course earmarks are treated as federal grants on the back end. And just this week, we'll be debuting, and I'll be hopefully recording later today, a little pre-recorded webinar on the Reconnecting Neighborhoods Combined Notice of Funding Opportunity. Those grants are due on September 28th, a really exciting program that was, of course, championed by our own federal delegation, especially Senators Cardin and Van Hollen. So it's only right Maryland takes advantage of it. Talked a little bit about the meetings. I won't kind of spend too much more time on this slide, but you know, I think our goal is really to kind of grow our ability to be your sounding board and provide you all with as much information and awareness as we can about federal opportunities as they open up. And one other thing I'll highlight before closing here to hopefully give you guys back a little time are some of our direct resources I've pulled here. We're always working, Heather Murphy and her team are always working on developing new tools to help everyone in the state. Here I have our charging and fueling infrastructure grant mapping tool, which is pretty neat. As you guys are thinking about electric charger siting locations, you can filter this tool by nearby locations. Is the charger located in an equity community? Is it located on one of our fuel corridors, which is also a key definition for the charging and fueling infrastructure program? We're going to hear a little from Sandy Hertz later today. SHA also has a phenomenal kind of flood and climate risk tool that you could also do some mapping on. I know many of you have probably already used that as well. But we're always trying to develop tools for you all that can also assist your federal funding applications. I mentioned the letters of support. There's a link to our request form in this presentation. Please check it out. I know this will be distributed afterwards. And of course, our grant newsletter. So if I did see you at MACO and you gave me a business card, by shaking my hand, you signed our disclosure statement saying I can sign you up for our newsletter. Congratulations. But we have all sorts of good stuff on there, and when grant opportunities and funding announcements open up, that tends to go out the first week of every month. So with that, I have my contact information here. If you are ahead of the curve and you've got your smartphone out ready for a newsletter QR code, please feel free to scan here. And we also have our websites, mdot.maryland.gov/IIJA grants. And you'll see some resources for the infrastructure bill, what we're applying to at MDOT. We also have some disclosures on there for grants we are seeking, of course, and a page in development I'm going to put on my hat on if I were a public works director and I had stormwater, transportation, road, bike ped needs. How would I kind of approach seeking federal funds for some of those projects? That is a work in progress, but we are looking forward to continuing to grow those resources. And with that, I will take a pause and open to any questions.
Any questions from the members? Well, Sean, I'm excited to get your newsletter. I think it's a great addition. We can never go for enough grants.
That's
around
right.
here. We need the money. I'm sure MDOT knows we need the money.
No doubt about it. Thanks,
Yeah.
Chair Walker.
And
No
in case
problem.
you did not have your smartphone out, as is our practice, we will post this PowerPoint that Sean has provided on our website, and you could always grab it after the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Regina. All righty. So we'll move to the next item on the agenda. This will be a two-part presentation. First, it'll be Ms. Ellen Singleton, who will share information about the recently submitted project grant, followed by Sandy Hertz from MDOT to discuss the coordination efforts under both the project formula and the discretionary grant program. So Ellen, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. Eileen Singleton with BMC staff, and I'm going to give you an overview of our grant application. Speaking of grants, we just submitted one last week to the Protect program. So Regina, next slide, please. So I'll give you a quick overview of the Protect program in case there's anyone that's not familiar with it, and then an overview of what our application was. Next, please. So Protect stands for, can never remember, so I need to read it. Promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation. And it's under the Federal Highway Administration program, and in general, it's looking to fund projects that address climate resilience as incorporated into the surface transportation system. There are 4 programs under the in the Protect program. They're listed here with the funding amounts: planning grants, resilience improvements, community resilience and evacuation route grants, and at-risk coastal infrastructure grants. The planning grants are 100% federally funded through the Protect program, and the other 3 are 80% Protect, 20% match needed. And in the notice of funding opportunity, there is a big focus on addressing disadvantaged and overlooked communities. So next slide, please. So just as background on how we came to develop a regional proposal, in the local jurisdictions have been doing some resilience work. The state's been doing a lot. We've been doing some regional work that you may be aware of. We developed the Climate Change Resource Guide couple years ago, and then recently developed the Climate Resilience Guidance for local jurisdictions and recommendations for interjurisdictional coordination on climate resilience. And those links are available to all those documents, which are on our webpage. And in developing the recommendations for interjurisdictional coordination, some of the recommendations included develop a resilience strategy to be implemented collaboratively, consider opportunities to build on ongoing efforts of interjurisdictional collaboration, and identify opportunities for sharing state and federal grants and funding. So those are right from the recommendations document. And the Protect program came along kind of as we were developing this document, and we thought that would be a great next step for us to look at. So next slide, please. So we did take a look at that and pull together a group of stakeholders from the region to develop what we're calling the Baltimore Regional Roadmap to Resilience. And that was a name from Jen Aosa in Baltimore County came up with that Baltimore R3 project. And so I think that has a nice succinct ring to it. Our grant includes the entire region, and it was officially submitted by the Resilience Authority of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. I've worked with Matt Fleming, the director there, to develop the application, and he pushed submit on the grants.gov. As I mentioned, we had a development support from all the jurisdictions, from the Resilience Authority. We had representatives from MDOT, MDE, MDEM, and the South Baltimore Gateway Partnership. We had letters of support from BMC and BRTB, which covered the jurisdictions and the member state agencies. We had a separate letter of support from MDM and the South Baltimore Gateway Partnership. And our total request was about $1.3 million. Next slide. So our proposed scope of work had 3 main tasks. We proposed the first one as developing and implementing a stakeholder engagement plan, which we wanted to make sure that we had a focus on identifying folks who are vulnerable communities or overlooked populations. So about a quarter of our funding goes to the stakeholder engagement plan development and implementation. Then the biggest chunk of our work is developing the Baltimore Region Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, or TRIP. In the Federal Highway Administration calls it a RIP, Resilience Improvement Plan. And in discussions before we developed this proposal, people just didn't like the name RIP, so we called it a TRIP. And MDOT is actually also developing a TRIP, so there's some commonality there. And so I have in the next slide, I have a little more information about what that is, but we saw this document as kind of having 3 components. One is looking at doing an infrastructure vulnerability assessment. So that would be of the infrastructure and how the potential impacts of climate change to our infrastructure. The second part would be looking at vulnerability assessment of the infrastructure users. And the third would be developing an action plan. So looking at the assessments and then developing a list of projects. And those 3 documents together would be our Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan. And then the second phase would be developing revenue mapping, which is something that Matt from the Resilience Authority knew more about than I do, but I think that the idea is looking at the projects that you're proposing and trying to come up with how they'll be funded and helping with prioritization and identifying potential funding sources. So that's kind of the next step of the TRIP. So not just having a document out there, but kind of trying to go to the next step and say, okay, how can we implement this? Okay, next slide. So just a short overview. This is from the Notice of Funding Opportunity for PROTECT, and I think that was where this Resilience Improvement Plan concept came about. And actually, I guess I should have mentioned, which I didn't way at the beginning. So the PROTECT program, there are 2 pots of money. There's the formula funding, which the states get, and so Maryland has that, and they're doing their work, I think maybe including the Maryland trip. And then there's discretionary funds, which is what we are applying for. And so the funding that I showed was the discretionary pots. So as the PROTECT program was rolled out back initially when the formula funding came out, and they came out with this concept of the Resilience Improvement Plan. And so in big picture, what it would do is identify short and long range planning activities and investments with respect to the multimodal resilience of surface transportation. And of course, input from all entities, in our case, local governments and the state. We don't have any tribes that we've been coordinating with. And there's a focus on a systemic approach to transportation system resilience and identifying critical needs, including developing a risk-based assessment of vulnerability. So it's not sort of a random approach, but it's a process that you can put in place and follow through, not just once we do this document, but further on, trying to use that to help identify and prioritize projects. And one of the benefits of having a resilience improvement plan in place is that future requests to the PROTECT program, if you are applying for one of the 3 other program areas that require a match, if there is a resilience improvement plan in place, the match requirement can be reduced by 7% if the resilience improvement plan is in place and the proposed project is prioritized in the document. And you can reduce the match for another 3% if the resilience improvement plan has been incorporated into the Metropolitan Transportation Plan or a long-range statewide transportation plan. So I saw this as, or our stakeholders, you know, we saw this as a good opportunity for something that BMC can do to support the region, and as entities go forward and maybe request funds through Protect in future years. I think right now there's anticipating, I think, another 3 years of this process, discretionary funding process. You can hopefully get a reduced match requirement. Okay. So we had a good group that came together to develop the application, and of course, if and hopefully when this project is funded, we'll have a much broader array of folks that are participating from the local jurisdiction level, state agencies, and other community organizations. And these are just an example of some of the community organizations. We haven't reached out to all of them, but they are examples of who we would want to reach out to in addition to others. Okay, next slide. This is just a quick overview of the schedule that we submitted. We anticipate it being 1.5 to 18 to 21 month process for this project. And this is how we broke down the tasks. And again, I think I mentioned it was about $1.3 million. And so we are looking forward to hear a positive response. I don't know how long it will take, but we'll keep you posted. I think that's it. If you have questions, let me know. I can stand for if there's questions now, and then I have to jump to another meeting, but obviously feel free to email me anytime if anyone has questions after.
Thank you, Ellen. Any questions from the members? All right, if you have questions later, we'll make sure you have Ellen's email, and then we'll move on to Sandy to do her presentation. Thank you, Ellen, we appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, or try to.
Yes.
Eugene told me I have the power, so I'm excited. Try not to abuse it here. Let me know if it's showing up for you guys.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So good morning again. My name is Sandy Hertz. I am the director for the Office of Climate Change Resilience and Adaptation here at MDOT. And I was asked to present out on the Protect program, which Eileen just mentioned in the previous presentation. So I'm kind of hoping I can share some additional good news nuggets as I go through my presentation. Oops. So just a quick overview of what I want to share today. And thank you, Eileen, for having to say the very long name of this program. So now I get to just say Protect. So well done. I want to go over the two pots of funding that Eileen mentioned, which is the formula funding, which does come in to MDOT and the state, and then also the discretionary program, which she focused on in her presentation. And then I'm going to spend a little bit of time about the development of the program, primarily at the federal level, and then get to how MDOT is approaching project identification, and then at the end, open it up for a bit of discussion. So first, this is how the Protect formula program looks for Maryland. So MDOT, the State Highway Administration, is slated to receive approximately $107 million between the federal fiscal years of 2022 and 2026. So it's a 5-year program, and roughly that equates to a little over $20 million per federal fiscal year. Some of the apportionments and the specific allocations within that formula program are listed below. So there is a 2% set aside for resiliency planning under the formula program, and that's primarily intended to be used for the development of transportation resilience improvement plans. There's also a 10% limit on funding for development phase activities. So that would be planning, pre-design, design. And as Eileen mentioned, with the formula program, there is a potential for reduction in the non-federal share. And I'll get a little bit more into that in one of the upcoming slides. Eligible facilities as listed under the formula program include federal aid highways, public transportation facilities, and port facilities. In addition, there are eligible activities that are basically put into essentially 4 buckets. So it's resilience planning, resilience improvements, community risk, resilience and evacuation routes, and at-risk coastal infrastructure. One of the things that is very interesting about this this program within the federal highway, guidance documents are really just the focus on and the inclusion of natural and nature-based features as an eligible activity. The IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, actually included both blue and green infrastructure definitions, which was not previously seen in the section or the federal code under U.S. Code Title 23. So that was great news for DOT because it allows us to also look at natural and nature-based features as resiliency measures that could be included in our projects. And then this is a look at the discretionary grant program. So I'm giving the big picture. So when you see these giant numbers on the screen, please keep in mind that this is a national pot of funding. So we're competing against, everybody that's eligible in the US. But they have set aside $1.4 billion between, again, federal fiscal 22 and federal fiscal 26. They've apportioned it a little bit differently at the national level. So they're looking at approximately $200 million in planning grants, almost $1 billion in resilience improvement grants, $200 million each in resilience and evacuation route grants, and at-risk coastal infrastructure grants. So that is a lot of money to be spent on making our nation's transportation system stronger. And I know that Eileen had this on one of her slides. I just want to reiterate that the PROTECT formula and the PROTECT discretionary program funding is intended to be used for risk mitigation from primarily natural hazards and weather type events, but it does allow for the use for cybersecurity and some additional functions as long as those activities are also related to natural hazard and weather-related response activities. So there is still that tie-in to threats to surface transportation from natural and weather-related events. There's a distinction between the eligible facilities list for the formula program versus the discretionary grant program. The discretionary program expands the eligible facilities to also include intercity rail passenger transportation. And then in terms of the distribution, one thing that that's a little bit different from if I go back up to the formula program versus the discretionary, you can see that in the formula program, the limitations or the percentages in terms of the breakout for focus on the funding is really focusing on implementation. So you have between the 2% set aside for the resilience improvement planning and the 10% limit on funding for development activities, the majority of it is really focusing on implementation. So they're looking for us as a state to put resilience measures out into practice. And the difference when you look, the contrast when you look at the discretionary grant program is, again, looking at construction, but it's also looking at making sure that the investments are being made in rural areas. There is a set aside for both rural areas as well as tribal areas. The third bullet underneath the distribution and limitations is actually similar between the formula program and the discretionary program. I didn't highlight it on the formula side because I figured I could talk to it on this slide. When they are referring to new capacity, there was a lot of discussion about what does that term mean on the webinars that Federal Highway is hosting related to these programs. And the questions that were asked were basically, what do you mean by new capacity? Because from an engineering perspective, if you're improving stormwater management facilities, then for volume control, let's say, then you are expanding the capacity. And we wanted to know, how are you defining it? So new capacity in the sense of the PROTECT program is referring to new roadway or alignment type facilities. So in the context of resilience practices, if you have a road that is continually flooded and you are proposing to create a new road route, a new route in and out of a community, let's say, that would be considered new capacity. Similarly, if you want to build in redundancies for emergency evacuation and you have the existing road in place, but you want to add a road so that there are more places or more opportunities for people to get in and out of communities, that would be considered new capacity. So I just wanted to highlight that briefly. There is a limit set on it, so we are not allowed either under the formula program or in discretionary at the federal level. They are not allowed to approve funding and expenditures for over 40% of construction for new capacity. So that is something that comes up often. We hear about capacity a lot in transportation, so I wanted to address the elephant in the room right off the bat. And then the other, as I noted, the difference between the discretionary and federal formula program also included intercity rail passenger transportation, and they've also set a limitation on no more than 25% could go towards that. So one of the things that I'm hoping that, I don't know if Eileen is still on the call or not, but this is the good news slide, I believe. So hopefully she's still here. I just wanted to highlight the way that the apportionments or the allocations are determined. And this is actually more Heather Murphy's expertise. So I will defer to her when it comes to formula funding. But in a nutshell, the apportionment that MDOT and the state get through the formula program is based on a calculation that can be found in Title 23 of the US Code. Essentially, they are using for all states the same kind of approach. It's a very transparent approach, at least to the federal highway folks, and the apportionments are determined by them. I believe it's done on an annual basis, and that may be where Heather chimes in and says, "No, you're wrong." But I believe I believe it's annual.
You're right.
Oh, yay! Woohoo! I'm going to stop now. And then at the on the grant side, as I mentioned earlier, the allocations are bucketed out into those 4 categories, and all of those pots of funding are competitive. Mentioned already, the difference between formula and grant eligible facilities is slightly expanded for the discretionary program. And here's the good news, if Eileen didn't know this. Eligible activities under the formula program, the 2% set aside is intended for the resilience improvement plans. And that's the non-federal match that is required. Now, what was submitted by Eileen and the team would be, in my opinion, considered a planning activity. And under the discretionary grant program, those are 100% federal cost share. So there should not be a non-federal match requirement for, submittals that are focused on resilience improvement plans, and essentially the scope of what she described to me meets the criteria that they are intending for that planning pot of money. And if you remember on the previous slide, they have set up $200 million across the 5-year program for planning. One other mention as it relates to funding at the discretionary level is they have indicated in the NOFO that the minimum award is $100,000 for planning activities, or for all activities, I guess. And they did not indicate a ceiling, but I do believe that the original NOFO that was released in April was over 800 million. So I'm assuming that you couldn't possibly get an award that's over whatever the NOFO amount was, but there was no explicit ceiling mentioned in the guidance documents. In terms of eligible entities, the formula program does come into state highway, and it does come into the state. On the grant side, states, MPOs, local governments, political subdivisions, I say limited under the eligible entities under the grant program, primarily because the political subdivisions, I believe, are for those inner city rail transportation projects. One thing that is similar between both and is often a hiccup in getting grant funding moving at the state level is federal aid requirements will be under both programs. So essentially, all of the things that MDOT, state highway, and our other modes have to do as it relates to federal program funding will be consistent under both the grant and the formula program funding. So I know that state highway has some information up on their website related to local projects and some guidance documentation. So if there is a request for us to share that information, I can see if I can get somebody to put it in the link, or the link in the chat after this presentation. A little bit on the program development. So the federal highway guidance for the formula funding was issued roughly a year ago to the states. I've already spoken to the need for it to focus on natural hazard resilience. And they have many statements in there related to the purpose of the funding and what they can be used on, including specific example projects from a highway standpoint, and even including transit in the guidance document. The underlined and bolded text on this slide are actually links to the specific documents. So I will share this slide deck with Regina so that it can be distributed to the attendees later. There's some great information in all of the documents that I have highlighted on this slide. The third bullet underneath the formula program guidance is one that warrants a bit of discussion. The intention behind the PROTECT program is to complement existing formula, federal aid program funding that comes into state highway. So they are looking for us to determine the incremental cost of making assets more resilient. And the simplest way for me to describe this would be if you have a bridge that is continuously overtopped during 10-year storms or 100-year storms, and you want to replace that bridge because of the recurrent flooded damage. One of the things that could be done is you could put the exact same profile of bridge in place, and essentially you're not really going to get any resilience out of that because you're putting it in the exact same situation that it was in before, where it was continually flooding. However, if you decide to extend the approach roadways leading up to the bridge and you elevate the bridge, and maybe you put in some natural and nature-based features to help buffer from flooding, the approach roadway elevation gain, maybe you even change the way the bridge is built and you have open scuppers on the deck so that it drains better, and you have the resiliency in terms of the natural features. Those components that comprise your resiliency measures would be what you would capture as the incremental cost for the betterment of that project. And that is what they would want you to fund under PROTECT. And maybe the majority of the bridge replacement piece would come out of your bridge formula program. So it's kind of confusing, but that is the guidance that we have. There are some projects that might be considered completely primarily for resilience. So an example of that might be slope failures and slope protection. So it's a nuance that nationally speaking, the Federal Highway Division offices have been asked to weigh in on as projects come in and proposals come in. And I can tell you candidly that there is a lot of variation in how the division offices are interpreting it. So you never know what you're going to get, I guess, is the caution. So the approach to those types of projects would be to really spell out what you believe are the betterments versus the replacement in kind sort of strategies. The DOT released a benefit cost analysis guide for discretionary grant programs in January of this year. It's not specific to the PROTECT program, but it is a great tool for folks that want to apply for discretionary grants under US DOT across all of the different modes. And then, as Eileen highlighted in her presentation, the discretionary program NOFO was issued in late April. There were a number of grant program webinars hosted by Federal Highway from May through June of this year. They had a rolling web presence for putting in your questions. One of the things that we've seen in terms of not just the PROTECT program, but also some of the other newer programs under IIJA is the lag sometimes in being able to get better guidance on the program. So I bring up the last two bullets here as a case in point. I think many people thought that when you submitted your questions through the portal that they set up for the PROTECT discretionary program, that you would get an immediate response from Federal Highway. And in talking with some of the staff at Federal Highway, there is a change in the way that they have been, well, maybe it's not a change. They have a very disciplined process when it comes to making sure that they are providing responses to all stakeholders. So they were still compiling questions through the end of their webinars. And then they had to go through and develop answers for all of them and then get them vetted internally. So essentially, they were not able to share the Q&A responses until 2 days before the grant applications were due. So that is not ideal. I'm sure they wanted it way ahead of that, but on the bright side, they are there and posted now for next year's discretionary grant cycle. So there's a lot more clarity, hopefully, in the Q&A that have been posted. In terms of what we're doing at MDOT, kind of going back again to the timelines for when things were released to us, we have been combing through not just the formula program guidance, but also the BCA guidance, as well as the Q&As that are now posted related to the discretionary program, because there's a lot of similarities between the two. Internally, we have developed evaluation forms and working on guidance documents and SOPs to help identify and screen potentially eligible projects under Protect. It includes the evaluation information from the Protect guidance, and then the information that's specific to the federal aid highway program in terms of what is required to obligate funds. We have also included priorities for investment that are more regionally focused. So I had the opportunity to take screenshots from this Microsoft form that our team developed. And I decided to pick the one that says MPO priority because I thought that would resonate better with you guys. But there are also questions related to, is it in a Justice 40, is the project located in a Justice 40 community using the federal tool? It also has a similar question for the MDE EJ screen tool that is used in Maryland. There are questions related to the purpose of the project. Is it related to, is it emergency evacuation route? What is the level of vulnerability? Is it located in identified vulnerable areas? So within Maryland, that would include the Post-Smart Climate Ready Action Boundary that was developed through the Post-Smart Council a couple of years ago. And then there are things that are very specific to the pots of funding that you may be looking to use under the Protect program. So the form itself is in beta testing, essentially internally. I guess I should say pre-beta testing. We have the form pretty well fleshed out. We need to have some additional reviews of it, and then we would be putting it through for our MDOT folks to kick the tires and tell us if it's working. And the long-term vision that we have is, as we're looking in future years, this would be something that could also be used for partners and discretionary grant program type applications. So more to come on that. This is my last slide with any meat on it. And some of you on the call probably recognize the steps on this slide to be very, very eerily similar to the CTP process that we follow in Maryland. One of the things that I wanted to bring up today is, just the opportunities that we have at a state level to partner. And ironically, I was also in discussion with Anne Arundel County, Matt Fleming and Eric Michelson over there. And we were working on coming up with a project that we could partner on that would help both the county as well as MDOT. And we didn't have enough information yet from the discretionary grant program to really push that one forward for this year. But we do want to continue talking and hopefully find some opportunities to do a local state partnership for next year's discretionary funding. We need to get a better handle on what local priorities are, and we need to align with the governor's directives as it relates to demonstrating discipline and how we do our investments. You know, are we being responsible with the formula funding that we have, and are we pursuing projects under both the formula and discretionary funds that will be impactful and promote economic growth, and as well not leave any of the communities out to or behind, I guess is how it's typically worded, but really focusing on that. And then looking at the process type stuff, we want to, as I mentioned, finalize and distribute the evaluation forms. We want to make sure that the available federal aid guidance that we have posted, either through State Highways site or through other MDOT locations, has the information that you all need to help if you pursue discretionary grants. And then we haven't determined the timing of this, and that's part of what I would like feedback from you guys on today is looking at establishing calls for projects. And that would be for both internal to MDOT as well as the entities that are eligible under the different programs. And then like today, coming before you all and giving regular updates on the progress of the formula program, where investments are being considered, and then ideally working it into the CTP process in a way that allows for active engagement and the ability to collaboratively come up with projects within the MPO area. And that is all I had for today, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you guys may have for me.
Thank you, Sandy. That was pretty informative. We appreciate you giving us the presentation this morning. Members, do you have any questions?
Hi, Sandy. Bihui from MDP. So I'm thinking probably MDOT already thought about us doing that. You know, right now you have many of climate change related projects or programs of funding from federal government, and whether or not the county's priority letter every year they submit to the MDOT. And previous standard is you only limited 1 or 2 priorities because the limited funding. Now you have a new programs and new category, climate change. I wonder if you want to encourage the county to submit those projects, ideas through your priority letter and have a new category in the priority letter says climate change related or resilience related projects, something like that.
That's a great comment. Thank you for that, Bihui. And yes, the short answer is yes. We would like for the county priority letters to indicate which projects they believe would have a resilience component to it, so that we could flag those for the protect funding. And it also, to your point about the limitation on projects, I can't really speak to that. That's not I'm a biologist by background, and I'm not a planner, even though I feel like I'm starting to develop planning tendencies. But the intent for this and some of the other climate focused programs is really to move the needle on mitigation strategies, and whether that's mitigation for natural hazards or mitigation for transportation emissions, the focus should be on return on investment and good projects in appropriate areas. And that is the approach that we are trying to emulate by developing the evaluation forms and developing more specific guidance internally for our project engineers. And I think in terms of submitting the priority letters, which I believe happens in April, according to that last slide that I showed, having those forms available for others to use to make that call on whether or not the projects they have would fit under protect, would be helpful too, I'm sure. So thank you for that comment, Bihoy.
Sure.
DeAndrea, Bruce Gardner has a question.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Hi, thank you. Great presentation, a lot of good information about process and how things would move forward. I guess, my question would be a little bit more specific about, and basic about, there might be state highways within our jurisdiction that we don't tend to think about for a capacity, mobility, equity improvement. But it does have, you see the flooding signs up. There's history of something flooding in the past. Who's our best point of contact? Or contact is determine, how that facility is being looked at. If it's being looked at, is it our district engineer? Because great to have ability to state priorities, but some of these things, our capacity to evaluate something on the state system is limited, and our desire to focus on that versus all the other things we have going on. So I think really, nice to be able to state a priority, but we need that partnership with the local district or whoever is in the lead to say 29 near, near Broken Land is a flood area. How is this rate? What is it being done? Are you paying attention so that you're not missing out for all the other colleagues? Similarly for Baltimore City, I would think that, those are significant national highway system facilities. It shouldn't necessarily be on Baltimore City to, how can they find out? And, not to ask a question for my colleagues, but, I think there's those higher level system things. These are system preservation. We're used to MDOT taking the lead on those, and I hope they would continue to do so, but coming to us for input on them.
Yeah, no, that's, that's really speaking, Bruce, to the need for improved collaboration and communication on risk areas. And so the short answer at the beginning of your question was, you would probably be best served going to the district. However, I will caveat that by saying, I would love it if you would also copy my office. And you could just send it, just include me on the submittals that you have to the district offices. The other suggestion I would make is that there's a fantastic app that is not served up by MDOT, but it is served up by, I believe it's Department of Natural Resources, called My Coast. And I know, because I live in Howard County, that 29 at Broken Land is not in a tidal area. So I don't want to give the false impression that the My Coast application is only limited for coastal flooding, but it's a way for us to crowdsource in Maryland flood risk in a way that we can then, use those types of applications as data sources to inform where we have recurrent flooding. And we have a giant system across MDOT. I don't know the actual, thank you for putting that in the link there, Sean. So that's the app I just mentioned that is served up by a DNR. But, with a large system, we don't always know where the recurrent flooding may be occurring. And you mentioned the national highway system, but I would also say that, when it comes to emergency evacuation and the need for redundancy, when you're looking at a a need to get out of hazard areas, we need to be thinking of it as a transportation system that's comprised of state, local, and municipal. And we need to understand where those risks on any of our systems may prohibit us to provide safe transportation for those at risk out of their communities. So that's probably a long-winded way of me saying we don't, I would encourage you to reach out to the districts. Please also consider sending a copy to my office, and we are actively capturing the data that we know of known risk locations. And it's not even just extended to flooding. If there's a slope failure, if there are things that are happening adjacent to our roadways, we may not be aware of the severity of the risk, depending on how often we get out to take a look at these locations. And I'm not up on the schedule for that, but you can never over communicate. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the members? I'm glad that you mentioned the slope failure. We have Frederick Road that we've been trying to figure out what we would do in that area. So Baltimore County will definitely be reaching out on that one because it's something we need to work on sooner than later.
Sounds good.
Yep. Okay, so hearing no other questions from the members. Thank you so much, Sandy, for your presentation. Is there any other business to come from the before the board this morning?
Nothing from BMC.
All right. Hearing none, then I'll call for a vote to close the meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you all so much. Our next meeting will be held virtually on September 19th. We thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.